아래 당서 가서 당서 동아세다 디기주에게 탑람데라 다 가르쳐서 나가서 삼로 토네 가서 삼로 셈나로 삼로 멤버들이 하 예와치 상보다 멤버 예와치 멤버들이 방제 내 사비리게 네 즉 검제 뭐 권역도 배시 어두시하게 다지면서 동아세다 디기주에 달 두시오레스 데네자 당한데 지금 소수기 삼류 상한 예와체제 다지 상 멤버들이 보야다 보이 님보 다 상초도 삼로디 파 냠린 제발라다 만주 제발라 데네기 냠린 제발 랍케 기회신 고고래 제산데 기회신이 시대 내 기회신 될래야 구성도 연된 전벽관에 대바지지도 제 아니 안될래야 안 구셔대 전벽관에 소수기 라마티잖아야 아직 냠내게 림바다 도시네 셈기 정도체 냠내 림바디 바 장진도신 아니 배수지 장고리에서지 디지체 나다치 기위시 대수디체 온도시 당보디제 가산티고 디슈레.
Good morning. So yesterday we spoke about the method by which one can achieve lasting, stable happiness, a happiness completely freed from all problems, suffering, and difficulties. And this method is about transforming one's mind, not at all trying to transform our outer conditions, but focusing on changing our very way of thinking. And this comes down to strengthening our habituation to wholesome or virtuous ways of thinking, and breaking our habituation to unwholesome or non-virtuous ways of thinking. So to be able to transform our way of thinking, we need knowledge in terms of how to do so, and we need guidance in terms of being able to actually do so ourselves. To receive knowledge and guidance, we need a spiritual teacher. And this was what we looked at in the first verse yesterday. Look, we need to rely on a spiritual teacher who possesses abundant, excellent qualities. And by receiving their guidance, and due to having a deep trust in their good qualities and recognizing their great kindness, we, from our side, need to strive to train our minds in the way we are guided.
데네기 계획신 데네 안주기 데네기 난 냠내 림바도 죽투그래 두고 말했으나 디 죽투그래스 김전 가르스나 당 안주기 띠엔들라야 지당 안주기 시게 미루딘 디나리가 안에 지금 땡 개발전디 안 다위 루딘세디 다위 땡세디 시장 다와게다 조주 상위 루딘디데스 시장 당 안주기 루딘디 다와게다 조주 상위 루딘디데스 지사 데네기 루딘 텔레야 안주기 남주의 배시 다데 야베 마스 야고 쉬우치 배시 다 예데 바래 남주 개발지 예데 바래 데네인자 당 안주기 체디기 동화시아다 디기주베네야 안가지 덴텔이야 죽투고레스 안디마세 개와치마게 하다 안절리 파 좀모 안절리 깨모와체 아니 만 델레 줘야지 봐 원료고 봐 하다 미우고 봐 토야기 아니 토투고레스 디야 토투고레 데니게 토야 규디야 만주기 덴텔이야 사투고레스 투고레스 아니 디마세 내 코리 동화 타달려 줘야지 다르비고 봐 토야디야 만주기 덴텔이야 죽투고레스 아니 디마제 심지어 탐지기도는 상계 고방 토야기야 아주 딘텔을 투어래 대장 아주 단주류딘 세아디베 마세 돈다 침보슈 투야기 투게 ben 돈다 침보 투야기 게 침보슈지 차대래세지 온도시네 지루아.
Thereafter, in the second verse, we answered a question. Do I have the capacity to actually be able to transform my mind? Because all too often we have a particularly mistaken way of appreciating just what we've achieved. We see ourselves as being quite weak, as being powerless, as being life controlling us. But what we looked at in the second verse yesterday is that having attained a rebirth with the 18 freedoms and endowments, particularly the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments, having achieved such a rebirth, we are able to do some incredible things in terms of transforming our mind. Because the particular quality that comes with a human rebirth is this remarkable human intelligence. And because this is not just an ordinary human rebirth, but a precious human rebirth, we have met the Dharma, we have faith in the Dharma, and we have an interest, a yearning to cultivate the qualities within. All of this can be done. And this is what makes this life, in terms of its potential, greatly meaningful. Because having a precious human rebirth, we can accumulate the causes, firstly, that will lead to further excellent rebirths, and thereby ensure that we can continue from life to life on our process of spiritual development. But not only that, we can accumulate the causes that can eventually lead to our complete liberation from the sufferings of samsara, attaining the state of lasting happiness for ourselves. And not only that, in dependence on this rebirth, we can even create the causes that will eventually lead to our attainment of Buddhahood, where not only are we liberated from suffering, but we have the most excellent skill and ability to guide others to achieve such a state. So in the second verse yesterday, we looked at just what a remarkable rebirth this is and why it is such a potentially meaningful rebirth. And the purpose of looking at this was so that we don't see this life, this opportunity, as ordinary or commonplace, and we no longer take it for granted, but rather embrace its full potential.
tarpada tamjiki me ko to ma de kewa chima ine yang a jogi den ni shi sangbo ji ni ba yu hen de to ba ji go de ni she to ba za ni to ye yu de kare lam na da ang jogi den ju li den to ye yu de kare lam na da ji lu nga yi su ni je den bi chu zum so ya de she de ni an je jin bei nyam le je dong ye sim dong wa de jin bei nyam le je ba de she de ni sui ba je de ni zun le zum ya je de ni an mo lam Dede maobana denike giwi shinyen da cheche denike chenyam le go ya go rawa shosbe molam jai de che do che de dinga de res chesan dinga de dangan juge da ju milu juma soya gyudi de res chesan di gyudi dangan juge di ne zo to samlo ta che di samlo de ya ki to shen samlo ta de ya to ta jo ni gyudi sa go res chesan denike ani be je che denike da den ju lu de be je chen mo yin ba tong denju lu de mo ge chen ba di ge chen bo nie ga wa to go wa di mo tong ni da di to ye gu di di re do wa sen be ge da ha go wa che je de ni gu di da ya ne ya do so so sam lo na da du shin yun ba che ba ji be ju ye je ne du se nyam ne je go de zo di re se de nga zo ka sa da nga zo nyam ne je go ye nga zo la len da go de di re se de ka sa di shu ye da nga.
So knowing then how precious this life is, just what incredible potential it holds, we were also guided yesterday to recognize that a life such as this is difficult to gain. It can be said to have been found only once. And the reason it is so difficult to gain is because of how difficult it is to accumulate all the required causes for a fully fledged precious human rebirth. So those causes are firstly ethical restraint. That is the cause that leads to an excellent rebirth as in the high realms as a human or as a god, where one restrains one's physical behavior and speech within the confines of what is ethical and strives to restrain one's mind within the confines of what is ethical. But furthermore, to have an act, not just a human rebirth, but a precious human rebirth, one needs additional causes. Those of generosity, so as to have material abundance. Those of patience, so that one's sense faculties are complete and that one easily develops harmonious relationships with others. Fourthly, that of enthusiastic perseverance, where one delights in virtue, where one has a disposition towards being virtuous and seeks out virtuous paths. And that then also requires prayer prayer to meet the Dharma, meet our teachers, and so forth. So these 5 causes need to be accumulated well in order to have a rebirth like we have. So having this life, we can recognize in lives previous to this, we created the causes whose rich result we are now experiencing. So from that, we can take confidence that we can do this again. But we need to strive to accumulate similar causes again. So with effort, we need to do so all day and all night, developing similar causes again. And this is how we take the very essence of this life. So therefore, it is important to no longer take this life for granted or to see it as commonplace, but to recognize just how rare and precious it is, and thereby, with that resulting motivation, strive to accumulate the required causes.
Alright, that was in the Kasanda some Tangway, Nalenta, the Dushe. Now, I didn't ma the Kasanga to get that, and again the Jahoji Tenchi Tele Deva Chetil, Lama di Marche, Sumban and Gashin to Troops and Yamcha or Son Water, the Kasadi Shurua, Telea Anji, Genoria, Yangachi Caros, Lame, Deva, Lame Gashin Troops, Lame Karanana, Karchesh Lamna Cheoris and Big Samnochuna, the Tata Chagoma, Lamegi, Cheda, Timbigate, that's our Karachi Chesnada me, Yamcha Gorma, the Cheda Martin Bigeta, Lame Yanchi, that is social said, and Kumakusha said the Negi, and Cheda Martin Bigeta, Jisho Sumbaina, the Jewa Yomareja, the Majibi never young Marella. Lame Kamazibi never young Maresti, the Jewa Maretti, Sumore.
So those are the 2 trainings that we looked at yesterday. Trainings in the sense of we need to train our mind in them. But I just want to add one additional and very important point in relation to relying on the spiritual teacher, because a potential danger may come if one doesn't understand this particular point, which is that it's imperative one develops a deep faith or trust in one's teacher, because that makes one open and receptive to his or her guidance. So this is imperative. And being open and receptive to one's teacher's guidance, one will seek out teachings, and in those teachings, one will be given guidance. And with deep faith and trust in one's teacher, one will strive to develop that guidance within oneself. This is excellent. This is how one spiritually develops. However, it is the responsibility of the student to become educated in the Dharma and thereby to be sure that the guidance being received is in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha. Whilst one is encouraged to do everything that the teacher guides one to do, and to do so in the way guided, this assumes one has checked out this teacher to ensure that they are fully qualified. If they give you any guidance which in accordance to your knowledge of the Buddha Dharma is not correct, then it is your responsibility to politely decline. This is important. So whilst it is correctly said that one should seek out and follow the guidance received, should that guidance ever not be in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha, politely decline. This is important.
Yeah, that didn't understand it. Then some that has some correction and to get lutin the tangible lidere. Says that and to get him shoe in that did how to catch a shoe, do not get him to it. Still that did in the Lea, and then to get Jimbatawa, Surim Subocomia, Zunrizamia, and the chick molam get it, Yamachore says that did yin say I'm going to do to Chasandusin, Yamachore, Jurua. 지난번에 자당한 섬나라 가용 그랬으나 다당한 때에 대고요서 타나요. 제자당으로 충충이 제자다 마음바데 길이길이시나로 가시 첼이야. 냠네 다등아 되스 펠레샤를 랴랴다 안도시네 직파 주파서 겸겸 들어가야 되겠지. 안 마길이신 자마디와는 직 냠네 지긴 선배 삼로 연구로 왔다면서. 되는 진행한 저기 냠네 시에 파 양제는 들어야게 내가 연구로 왔다.
So to to continue from where we came to yesterday, which was guiding you to recognize the great potential that this life holds. And that great potential is the profound impact that if one lives this life in a meaningful way, this life can have a profound impact on the trajectory of your future rebirths. Recognizing this, then one will want to, the wish will arise within one to strive in ethics, generosity, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and prayer. But there is one further one further obstacle that one needs to be aware of and strive not to be deceived by this obstacle. And that is this feeling that I have time. And this feeling that I have time is something that we are all subject to. One may say, well, I'm still quite young. I look at the average lifespan in this country or in my family. I know I have years and decades ahead of me. Or if one feels not so young, one can still have this feeling of there is time. I do not need to do anything right now. This lack of urgency comes from a misconception about the certainty of having time. This then leads us to wasting this potential and will lead to regret in the end.
Di samlo di denishile na di samlo di ngozo nyamlen chega la parse chagor. Chesna di samlo di mayan gi ta di mayan deni gi samlo di ngozo ma ge gi tablam karasam tang gore sena da den ma shu gore da ma siktege.
So this mistaken way of thinking is a major impediment to taking the very essence of this life. So now we come to the third verse, which addresses this. This body and life are unstable like a water bubble. Remain mindful of how quickly it declines and death comes. After death, like a shadow follows the body, virtuous and non-virtuous karma follows. Luida so the kichi man use and can go chat to words. Dimazeda got tembu meba churu nasheris, called Chala Rocho, Gun Shosho, and a meba chasho, churu nasheris, the bay chubur shache, Luidi and tembu meba, and ejike Gurcho, and the Ikichi Gugur, which is a tembu mineba, Lamson Chala Rocho, says the sungware. So looking at the first line, this body and life are unstable like a water bubble. So here, this verse is to encourage us to embrace enthusiastically the fulfillment of the potential of this life. So to do so, we need to recognize that both this body, so the body in terms of our physical health and strength and vitality, as well as our life, in other words, being alive, both of these are very unstable. They are likened to a water bubble. So a water bubble, we know, lasts only a moment. And across the expanse of lifetimes that we have had and will continue to have, a single lifetime, even of the duration of a human rebirth, is likened to a water bubble. But in particular here, it is fragility and its instability. We have a feeling that there is time, but the reality is our life, and certainly our health and vitality, this can end at any moment, and it is not at all stable. In particular, we can observe the change that our body, and therefore our strength and our vitality, has already undergone in this life. There is nothing stable here at all, but impermanence, when we look clearly, is abundantly clear.
There's Deniki, now to some Nalia, you are union meeting at Roshi. Penning out the own long in my dear, near Casa you, long in my teaching, Detroit, Digichavis, Casa you, said Kishigorwa. Tisada, do Sishimjana, long Emma you can do, Daddy, La Casa Yomare. Now the Daddy you can do long Amadilla, Lochawa Chatter, long Amadi Lord Bendichumare, long Amadi, Daddy out the Lochawa, Chesadi, answered the Yamadilla Yomare. 다등아도 니 should 짱하게 미디로와 니 should 접시 미마로와 혼이 가차들 그래서 직녀만 막 유유로 지루거래 또 로네 로사와게도 바 직지로 다 로를 집에 다 되는 마저 로나는 다와 중요 집에는 다와를 삼다는 다왕에마게 미디 진의 담배값을 얘기인데 진의 니배값을 얘기 말해 조사래 진의 니배가 미디 담배 얘기 미디를 갱고 개와래 어때 다월 집은 다 둔절의 집에는 둔장아마게 meeting that did that meeting the Lochaware, Yamade Chumare, Chesantini car gasare, but usual. Says that was in that Nimativena, Kazangi did that didn't do so, Gamba Chaser, Kazandi Chumare, Chesan Kazan the Zosa, didn't you get the Gamba de Kazan Yomare? She said, Nandu some Kazan Yore, Kiniga, your long ama Yore, San did got dozens at Chagore. Dinanjin, that how to choose in the Gamma Receiving. And that thing to do in the Gamachiki nearly that G. Jelly called Gamachiki Cheshun Cabayore. So do some Tadu Kiji you are to you are mother of Cuneyomare. Now some Nala on a long Emayu and the Lojema Gasore, Darkasinima Casayu, Sashi Shedigoro. Dinashing unto that Gia Guneme or some other Odanga Digi, Nani Digi, Lojema Digi, Cheshimon Dingoro. Just that the nigger go do some Udugores. 지선 지로 유로거래 지선 지레스 지자데 주르나지레스 다디나지 지비 뉴두 지비 치워전 받아 뉴의 지비 치워서 만저데 시에레 레라보레스 지산 베 시에기 겐 망고슈거레스 지상한도 마시에게 선번에디 겐 요요레스 지다랑 건 내나서 교인 가르 마주베네 로제지라 야라스엘은 그 뉴베코런 세지네 근데 그 시루고 was 니 멤버가 당한 저기 견들이야 내암게 견치네 내암다 말을에는 디기 견치에게 견 되는 중앙 추제사 되는 출로자야다 사염자야다 아니 메셔야다 되는게 견도 시야게 되는게 아니 지금 뭐다 다야로서 보다 칼라사다지 마리베네 되스 고모제 마리베 지니 추나 제모제도 되는게 어진에 직 시야게 지사 지치에 견들 빼 망고 쉬고레스 제사 되는게 다 시원이 아주 리드 유아트의 추나시에 제자 뉴도 지바 기디네 치에 타쳐바래 지난 치에게 끼는데 망보슈요래 그래서야지 두스는 삼당고 그래서 그래
So with this reflection, what we need to challenge within ourselves is this misconception about stability. We feel as if we have an immensity of time, and we also feel that we do not change. So when you think of yourself sitting here today, and you think of yourself a few years ago, a few decades ago, there's still the sense of, that was me. The truth is, that person completely changed. So if we think about it certainly on the physical level, it's very easy to see how the body changes over specific periods of one's life. When one was very little, when one was a young person, when one's middle age, and so forth. One can recognize quite clearly then that there's change. But actually, this process of change is continuous. The body is continuously changing. There's all underneath this cover of the skin and this veneer of stability, there's constant movement within. And on a cellular level, our body is changing constantly. But we relate to ourselves with a sense of stability, which is completely mistaken. It does not have a basis in reality at all. And where we are right now is that when we look back at any point in our life, we are older than we were. This means our body is changing. It's not just the calendar that changes. This body is changing. And likewise, where we are right now, we are younger than we will be tomorrow, next week, next month. And again, It is not the calendar that changes. This body is what is changing. This means our body is in every moment moving further from the point when it was new and fresh and closer to the point when it will no longer have the strength to sustain life. And when that moment comes, that the body no longer has the strength to sustain life, isn't necessarily in old age. It can happen at any time. And this is a further delusion we live with, that we will all live to a good old age. And whilst when we look at averages, obviously, there is an average, but there is no certainty for any one individual that that average will be achieved or not. This is the reality of it. And what I'm saying here, I don't think is anything that's intellectually challenging. Everyone will get it immediately. But what you need to recognize is that intellectual understanding and how we naturally relate to this life, they are totally discordant. We live as if we have time. We live as if this current state of my strength, physical, mental strength, this will remain, when it certainly will not. There's this constant process of change that our body is going through. So our death is certain. But not only is it certain that we will die, but along this journey of life, every period that we can divide our life into, our week into, our day into, that ends too. The session together will end, as yesterday's did, as will this retreat. Everything comes to an end. The opportunity to utilize each moment will end. This then we need to recognize. And what brings things to an end there are a multitude of causes that can bring things to an end. So if we return then to this life that we relate to with a mistaken view of stability, the truth is, something could be going very wrong within your body right now, and we do not yet recognize that a severe illness is about to befall us. Moreover, we may eat something and it just does not agree with us. It may even lead to the end of our life, but it may lead to severe illness and an incapacity for a while. Maybe enjoying time with our friends, but we're walking, we slip, we fall. Perhaps we hit our head, or maybe we break a bone, and this has a great impact on our life. Accidents can befall us so easily. Illness can befall us so easily. And this just is the reality of our situation. Every opportunity we have ends. This life and the opportunity it brings will end. And when that end comes is entirely unknown. And the reasons that can lead to its end are multiple. Therefore, we need to recognize the great fragility of this opportunity that we have.
Andu sene samna dang yong da chik ngang jin la ka samno ka le ge sen du chen ne du che ba du de ne du sene sam da de ka da xie ge ta chi de da xie ge ta chi de wa sa xie yin ba de den ke ba de sa de samla ya da jing ya ba den bu ru shi go le na min ji dang an zhe le ge xin ge xi ge be ne xi ge de ni mi ji xi ge de sen xi ge yo ba da ha go de ne da chi ba ya ba xi ge de sen be ya ba den bu ru ji li tu yo ma le 지자 내년자 인도도 삼다는 시에게 다 지원을 다 쳐버려 생각해 띠무게 다들 게디시그리에서는 다들 내봐요 말해서 보다 로자기 지리시그로 로두주 계제 로목주 지리시그로 로숨주 지리시그로 상이시 난이시그로는 된대 기능만 해봐요 말해서 지상 가르세는 예매 매바디 집에 있긴 뭐디 있긴데 게디 생각해봐요 말어 싸움 그디 장해봐요 말에 아니 지기 잡아줘도 안지마 안지게 로큐에 게 내봐요 말에 모라게 가니스 다그레 다그마르서 시도야 말 난 소소기 두스나 직 소소기 원에 균 하면은 지로 원에 안 현기 발치제제 두스네 겐테는 시시로 진짜 시엘은 내봐요 말에서 게디시기 말에서 땡케 가요 말에서 도시네 지산 데니기 긴디에 그디 챙에메 삼다도 시에를 내바메 치워내메 세데 하고 두고래지 지다다 데니 삼다도 시원에 내바래 지단 시원에 내바 시원 내바 타줘바래 그디 시그레신 시에를 내메에 땐데 그디 디바도 시그레 디바도 시그 말세 타줘야기는요 말 그디 신게 하고요 말에 세데 치워내메 세데 아니 도시네 하고 두고래지 뉴도 집에 치워 템바다 세도 뉴 내바 시그레 치워 내바 요 말에 세도 치워 그디 내메 땐데 요 말에 선배 도시네 삼다제 도시네 전국으로에서 올다.
Second line, remain mindful of how quickly it declines and death comes. So this really points to what we need to challenge within ourselves, the sense of stability, which is not based in any reality. Hence, it's very easy intellectually to disprove that this life is stable. So that we will die is widely accepted. There's no discussion about that. And that death will come is okay. Whatever is born will cease. That is completely normal. But the delusion we need to overcome is that the sense that I have time. So when we ask ourselves, can I say with certainty when death will come? And none of us can say when that will come. We can all accept death will come, but we cannot say when it will come. There's no one that can say whether they will die tomorrow or not. There's no one that can even say whether they will die today or not. We have our hopes, but that really is all that we have. There is nothing that is reliable in terms of when our death will come because of the wide number of causes that can have an impact as to our death. So right now, across our world, we look at humans, animals, so many are dying, are in the actual final moments of their life. And this could just be due to the natural ending of their life. It could be due to illness that has now brought a life to an end. Could be due to an accident, a natural calamity, whatever it may be. But none of these beings came into this year saying, this will be the last year of my life. When Easter comes, my life will end. No one knows this. But yet that their ending has now come. So no, we do not have time, a definite time to prepare. We cannot say, these are my final months. But we do need to recognize this instability because this will spur us into action, spur us into living a meaningful life. So again, the ending of our life, natural process. It's not a problem. But we need to utilize this remaining time very skillfully, very well.
Foundation sometime do Bendigo sometime Australia Lolia Benisem Sindu che sometime in Lolia do Temper do the seeing of the Carson Odanga Jike Uniwu Dugre Sambika Samlo Rochite, then they make Tisamlody and the Jik Uniwu Dugre Mount by the Cheshire or Samlody Gago or Digi. She's at the nest sometime or restaurant in Chenyamlin Chigalia. Nyamlin Majebaina, Chichidan Chenyamlin Majebaina, the nest sometime Dusan is Bustoborek, Matanaya, she's at the nigger good douchen, Chenyamlin Chasing douchen sometime, so Samlody, Chenyamlin Chelia, Gumatigore, these are the sometime or restaurant. And the Niki Chenyamlin Majebaina, Nyamlin do the Majebaina, dinner sometime that some Bustoboda Kanga cherish Mother Pendoska manager.
In the Tibetan or the second line, it ends with what we have at the beginning. Remain mindful of this. So we need to remain mindful of the our inevitable death and its great uncertainty as to when that will be. And why we need to remain mindful of this is because it serves to spur us on to utilize skillfully what remains of this life. So for you here, you have a wish to transform your minds, to live a meaningful life. So this is a very useful reflection. For those out in society, it's a very strange way to think. So to encourage them to think in this way, that maybe doesn't make so much sense. But for ourselves, we need to remain mindful that this life is ending. And we need to therefore utilize well what remains of this precious opportunity.
On that again, Austin some that never the she to Korea some that the name to any ever she were there. She ne carriers, said it to your one. Chezan, she ne carrier loved you. She not digger Chazan, she ne carriers and be some Chungura. Chezan, she were now, and the carriers never check it and never check it, check Marilana. Says I never check Maria. She not never chas on that the name she never Zawagin and Jay, never chow in the day. You and I Maroda. 제자들 신의 매바 체교 말에 신의 양자 개와치 연구です. 제자 시위 제수 류다 진바신 시위 제수 가르쳐서는 시위 제수 양자 개와치 연구です. 디 개와 렌디 가르쳐서는 류다 진바신 시대다 개와 렌디 유다 진 매비기 개와 렌 말에 제자다 근데 가와 개와 렌에서 개와 렌세 때라 나는 간들 개와 렌지 안 된들 개와 렌지 개와 이마도요 말에서 나는 근데 간들 개와 있는 간들 Nyawa, Ida, Dundro, Sum said, getting Andrew Kiwala, Yana, Nyawala Kiwara, Yana, Dundroli Kiwara, Yana, Idala Kiwara, Yana, Mili Kiwara, Yana, Lali Kiwara, Dendroli Alada me. Cesada, she named Mava Chagioma, Yanka Kiwachi Lingo Wars. Yanka Kiwa Lingo Wanza, Yanka Kiwa land, Lesa Gawa Lingo, Nyawa, Yana, Dundro, Yana, Ida, Dundroli Kiwalan, Dismoto, Shana Kiwala Sayamare. Dendroli Kiwalimba, Yana Halakiwa, Yana Milikiwa, Delmat Kiwala Sayamara, Jeda Kiwal, Shine, Meva Chagoma, Shine, Ayakiwashi Lengo, Kiwa Lensa de la, Tamana Carlos, Nandroda, Dendri Chevna, Nanayana Nandroli Kiwa, Yana Dendroli Kiwa, Essage, Ondusumore.
Taking to heart then the uncertainty of our time of death, and therefore the importance of utilizing what remains of this life well, the question will then follow, what happens after death? So, for those who believe that with the ending of this life, they become non-existent, then they don't need to worry about making causes for future lives, because according to the philosophy that guides them, when death comes, they are extinguished. But this is not how it is in reality. After death, rebirth follows. So this then is the start of the third line, after death. After death, rebirth follows. And just like has been mentioned, in the same way that death comes about in dependence on a wide variety of causes, hence it's impossible to predict when one's death will come, our birth, each and every birth, also comes about in dependence on causes. And in terms of the types of rebirth that any being can expect, well, there are only two directions one can go in. In the case of us humans, we can either remain in the high realms, so gain rebirth as a human again, or as a god, or we may fall into the lower realms, rebirth as an animal or spirit, or in the hell realms. Those are the only two directions one can take, and one will be born in one of those six realms.
And all those general she just never check your my Gewa Shilling or Gewa Lembana, Tangandro the Dendrini Mares, Tangandro the Dendroli Gewa Land, the Consideration, Timashins, Luda Timashins, the Susu Ludi, Kawato and Associated Ludi Timati, Lucy Ludi Mana, so Timati Maras, Pedina Shin. Lekana yiches to Tawalas, Chesan Lekawot Savana, Kivikawas and Kiviles or Kivile Savana, Delatine, Kivachima, Dental Kiwas. Then Andrew Migivil and Nakwas and Migiviles or Napilis. Migivile Savana, D. Debuti Kivachima, Ansolikiriana, Dundroli Kiriana, Nyawalikiana, Idana, Kirchis, Mandoli Kiru. Chesada, Mazukiwa Lemba Telia. Yudan Kienchile Dine Kewa Lingo by Inzam, Dendruli Kedi, Yudan Kienle Dine Kewa Lingore, Mandruli Kewa Den Yuda Kienle Dine Kewa Lingores, Chesna du Luda Timana Jes, Chesna Lekana Chistangor, Chesada, Mandruli Dendruli Kewa Lemba de Kari, Yugaratinsine, Yukarbo Kiwi Le Savala Dine, Di Jesutan, Kewa Le Savala Dine, and Digil Dine and Garden Dendruli Kirures. Then Nandre Migi Le Savala Dine. And Dendrol, Nandrol Maki to Gures. Chesadi, Nandrol Kiedi, you Migawalitin, you the touch over this, that teaches Tantores. Dendrol ke yu giwe le la tene ke wa da ta che ba de le chi strang ko che sa ka na le de chi sun chang ba la che sa di chi so ta ne nga zu lü ga wa de ne ji ma di chi so ro wa na xin nga zu ke wa ka bi le ke le ka se sa ba ne chi sa ba ne ke wa chi mang dendrol ke ro re mi ge le sa ba ne ke wa chi ma nga so ma ke ro re sa chi on du sun go re.
Whilst our death is certain, but the time and manner of our death is unknown, there will be a resulting rebirth in either the higher or lower realms. This is certain. And what it is that determines whether we are born again in an excellent rebirth or in the lower realms is the karma that has been created. So the third line continues, after death, like a shadow follows the body. And the fourth line, virtuous and non-virtuous karma follows. So it's this virtuous and non-virtuous karma that determines whether one attains a rebirth in the higher realms or the lower realms. So the Tibetan is literally white and black karma, and the meaning is virtuous and non-virtuous karma. And should it be a virtuous karmic imprint that is most powerful on our continuum, and that is what will ripen at death and lead to rebirth once again in the higher realms. But should it be a non-virtuous karmic imprint that is most powerful on our continuum, that will ripen at death and lead to rebirth in the lower realms. Moreover, the variety of the numerous karmic imprints accumulated in this life, they do not remain in this life. They follow us into our next life, influencing the experiences of that life. So in this way, our virtuous and non-virtuous karma follows us like a shadow follows the body from lifetime to lifetime. So in the same way that our death is certain, so too is it definite that we will take rebirth, and where that rebirth will be is determined by our karma.
지게 류다 소디 추추버나 지기 시에게 타쳐버려 기디 신야바 요 말에서 삼르다 시위게 망보여 제상 기디 신야바 요 말에 선비게다 시와디 산이시를 나니시를 기디시로 제게 주기제 이시 제일 시다 땡땡 균요 말 기디 신야바 요 말다 선비 삼르치 땅 대서 삼르다 세네 시조나다 안에 매바 책이랬으니 매바 책이 말에 이게 개와치 연구고 그랬어 다 개와 연구고는 개와 렌세데 가와요선 하는 간도다 하는 된돌 개와 니링 거스 제사다 간도를 간스 개와 랭요스네 디빌레사나 간도 개와 랭거레 개빌레사바는 된돌 개와 랭거레스 다 개와 렌세데 하고 봐 대하고도 간도를 개와는 가요레스네 다 강아슈거레스다 강아슈거레 냐와 이다사다 둔도에서 강아다 두세 강아레스 제사다 Dendrol kewa lena karayosne dela ngandule tene pe kewa dendrol sed pe masigi digi yores jeza digi ma yores de ha da dine za da ngzu kawa kewa lengo resne ngzu da ma kewa chima de shiru de kewa lena de kawa kewa lengo resne da so damga chi sholanna da nga dendrol kewa lengo iso da ngandul kewa na kanga dine jeza kanga de pe sa ge jeza da nga dendrol kewa len to ba chego dos jeza dendrol kewa len to ba chego za da 개월엔 발라 가르쳐 버렸네. 된도 개월엔 바디 기회지리기 시스템에서 땅아 개와서 오도서 그러다. 되네 인자 한다. 나중에 니 냠는디 된줄 개기 개화서 싸우고도스. 제 배수치는 싸우고도스 해야 돼. 그 삼로디 개화서 니 개 된줄 개기 유 개화서에게 삼로디 고고 그러다.
The process of the reflection that is the meditation that's pointed to in this third verse is that one first reflects on the certainty of one's death, and one recognizes death will come. I've seen this process of change that I'm undergoing, and there is no stability. So therefore what arises will cease. But when it will cease, this is completely unknown. And I can recognize this in society. People die at a variety of times due to a variety of reasons. Therefore, I recognize there are so many causes that can lead to the ending of my life that the time of my death is uncertain. But at death, I do not become non-existent. Rebirth will immediately follows in one of two places. I will either remain in the high realms or fall to the low realms. And what determines which rebirth I take, it's not a choice I have at the end of my life. The karma I've created, that is what determines where I'll be reborn. If my virtuous karma is strong and dominant, once again, I'll take rebirth in the higher realms. But if my non-virtuous karma is dominant, I will fall to the lower realms. This is the process of how rebirth comes about. And the lower realms are defined by their intense suffering. The higher realms are defined by their far, far greater happiness. So we all want to be happy. No one wants to suffer. So therefore, it's an easy choice. I want a better rebirth. I do not want to fall into the lower realms. And then one comes to the purpose of this meditation. I need to strive in accumulating virtue and purifying non-virtue. This is the result of this meditation.
다데는 사고도 좀 리고라 대라선 가르스네 시월은 해봐요 뭐 기디칭 해봐요 말 삼당에도 제사가 제마디고로 제마서 개와 두고 선반다 대상이나인데 시선들로 시 주야 말하게 되네 개와서 용어라기도 와 세상 되네서 다데는 방에 개회래디 사긴 선배 삼로디 딜리도 세상 남치 애매 삼당에도 아니 개화디 견도기에 개화딩에 다데는 사고도 선배 삼로디도 제사다 저게 어제 제마지 인세비 치기하지 삼로디 봐용고 말 지상에 다되는 제고도 다되는 싸긴 선비 삼로디 두고래.
And in particular, this determination, I have to accumulate virtue, I have to purify non-virtue, this needs to come conjoined with an urgency. It's not good enough if it's a mere intellectual understanding or something, yes, this will be good to do. We know from our life there are many things that we recognize are good to do, but they remain undone. This is too important. We have to transform our mind through the accumulation of virtue whilst this opportunity remains. Because the recognition that this meditation leads to is not only that I need to accumulate virtue, I need to do so from right now, and I need to do so in a sustained way. Because it is certain that this opportunity is drawing to an end. The opportunity that this life presents is drawing to an end. I do not know how much time I have, so I need to apply myself, and I need to apply myself from right now.
추름소야 링아싱이 추름소야 진배냠내자 쇠배냠내자 준죄냠내자 이네 몰람 야디 어디가들이다 된저기에 유 가벨레 사호레 디사바이나 개와치만 된저기에게 다 쳐버려 그래서 디하고 사도베나 진짜 디니 사야디 진짜 다 개와치만 된저기에 유 가벨레 사야디 다 사후도 그디 사고서가 다된 사고도 선배 이제 당에 사야디 가래서는 가상슈에 주름 내용하시 이제 주름소야 진배다에 쇠바고며 전주삼야 에는 말람자들이.
What does it mean to accumulate virtue? It means to accumulate our habituation to virtuous ways of thinking, so that these virtuous ways of thinking become ingrained within us, become an expression of who we are. And how do we go about this? Well, this was as presented in the second class yesterday. The accumulation of virtue in this context refers to the causes, accumulating the causes that lead to rebirth in the higher realms. Ethical restraint, generosity, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and prayer. Those 5. So these are what we need to accumulate, and we need to do so from right now and in a sustained manner.
다디네 간주게 제 먹어야 돼 가르선다 간주게 규디다 사교 말해시오다 지나디 마사와 간주게 규디 가르선 디 가상 간주 송송에 시에게 도초되리다 간주게 간주 류의 예주 때문에 주름 송야디 도초 류의 있으면 예주 제바는 소주바이나 가상 간주 소주기 매세 송야디 denrike gyur chagorwa chizada di docho so chögi se so chöba so chödi ge sembe kune lang so chöba ina deni mikewele di dene anan handol ki ngor chiza deni ge so chöba da deni kumaku de shengi che kumaku de samle kune la shengi kumaku yo de ne kumaku wele chiza so chöba majinba lemba misa loyim jeba and then jun tama chizu ngaja odus deso ane jige mikeware so re jesan din nabule denegi le sabana jenena nabule deso le dine ane garji gorsen nanson ma giro re se nanson ge gyudi dire jesan din jang de lunga yusmi yeje de zurum so yode nanson ge gyudi garu gore jesan di dire da lunga yusmi juyorwa yorwa da din jemena yorwa da.
So what we need to accumulate then are those 5 causes that lead to excellent rebirths. And what we need to refrain from are the opposite to those 5. In particular, unethical behavior, not restraining ourselves ethically, because those are the causes that lead to lower realm rebirth. So those are presented as 10. Not to kill, not to steal, not to engage in sexual misconduct, being 3 general ones to do with physical behavior. In terms of verbal behavior, not to lie, not to engage in harsh speech or divisive speech or pointless chatter. So these are 4 general ones in terms of speech to refrain from, because these create causes that only lead to suffering. And then in terms of the mind, it's covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong views. These 10 then are what we need to refrain from, because they only lead to suffering.
dine zada ngandru ki gyudi chesada dendru gyudi yane du she samdai de ngandru ki gyudi rashin ki ko dosho za jik yonggo mar chesa ngandru ki gyudi le thugo mar dine du shin samda je dine shin nga du nyamlen che de samyane ya de dang yu de chesa dine za that kana le je shin dawala so dine ge da pinanga samda de chiwe jik chiwa nge ba namchi nge me ane samda ane shiwe che so da jike ya josare masol padan dendroli mado yomar dike di giwi gewada mige che stangwa legi che stangwa dine zadangi gewi le tubugis dian tuwe dia ane dadan de tubu mado mango ban de tubu se de gidi chingeba yomar mashiwe dine ge tuya mara shisuna gyora se dine zang dadan de tubu du sembege samda jine de giwi mas giwi nyamle de dadan de che gore se war dine jana yingbo di sungor da.
So the result that one comes to from this meditation on the impermanence of our life is that a deep and abiding determination arises to develop a habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking, so that these wholesome ways of thinking become ingrained within one, become very much part of you, as well as then developing a deep repulsion to unethical behavior, so that, for example, the very thought to take a life, one feels repulsed by it. The very thought of being aggressive, one feels repulsed by it. The very thought of wanting to lie, one's repulsed from this. Then this is how one experiences this deep transformation, being drawn to be of benefit, being repulsed or deeply restrained from causing harm. And moreover, this determination to cultivate this way of thinking needs to be sustained. One needs to continuously be ensuring one's mind is ethical, and continuously ensuring one's mind is not going beyond the confines of what is ethical. So this requires constant repetition in terms of meditation and keeping in the forefront of one's mind. This is how habits are formed. And this then is the result of this meditation.
차라직 삼다 니 삼다 두 삼다는 뉴버 체체체 조네 되네 그 되네게 규리 알배는 가서 지게 뉴버 체가다 망와다 근데 숙체화를 사투고래서지 중국어 제사 되네 이자 조닝보디다 가상디 쉬어돼 인생군의 이보 렘별의 균심에 바뀌어 진유로 써야 돼 제사 다 되니나 체 균매셔봐 되냐면 제호래서지.
And in your own practice, I encourage you, when you meditate on this verse, to add the two lines from the previous verse, the last two lines, because it's not explicitly stated in the third verse, but it would be implied that in meditation one should include the last two lines of the previous verse. Please inspire me so that a mind that takes its essence arises unceasingly all day and all night. Because these are the kinds of thoughts one wants to have predominating one. One wants to, every day, every night, be thinking, I will not harm, I will only bring benefit, and have these minds arising within oneself again and again, because this is how we take the very essence of this life, which is to strengthen our habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking and break our habituation to unethical ways of thinking. And to do that, one requires a sustained effort, because this is how one develops any habit. And what we are trying to develop habitual ways of thinking, which are virtuous and wholesome. And by doing so, day and night, then one is developing ever more causes. And how one experiences that is it becomes ever more ingrained within oneself, very much part of who you are.
dine samdan be yagura chadio dine ge nganzo kiwi le dine yagusa shabena dine nganzo shielya ane shena ke was kayo mare kasne nganzo shielya ki shena ke zo de da shine mo bana de gang chigire sanbes chi yor bada dine shena ki yor ba de nganzo dine kiwi le yagusa bane shine dine shena ke wa be ba dine shin ko shibe ne ya ke den zol ma ki yor zada kangba ningba ne sa ba jebe je wa na ji 강반님 번에 부여시 사바나 조바나 지지게 lumba 현대진에 아니 lumba 아니 지게 뭐 갈래고 요새는 바지에 겹지야 lumba 사바치 조데 지바 제가 되네서 소수기 로데고 제치고 그러더니
By striving from this point to whenever one's life does come to an end, what you can have confidence in is that when your life ends, or is ending, and you are lying on your deathbed and you're looking back, you will be able to leave this life without fear and without regret, because you know, I've lived a meaningful life. This last period of my life, I really have made some effort and I have experienced good results. Therefore, I'm confident about what will follow. Because when our death comes, it's very possible that one will be fearful, knowing that one made some bad choices in life. But if one has lived well in this final period, transforming one's way of thinking, when death comes, one won't have regret, and one won't have fear about what lies before one. And in fact, one will actually be leaving this life with a sense of lightness. It will be like when you are moving from an old dilapidated home into a brand new building. This is what it's like. Or when you are able to move from a country that's falling apart to a country that's flourishing. This is what it'll be like. You will embrace the leaving behind of an old body for a new life.
제가 되네기 삼다들이야 등한주기 다 변조 규칙을 고고는 당아 변조 명이 디사수사 말에서 저러 디네요 말에 변조 거야요 말들이야 변조 규칙을 이나라 규칙 명에 있는 수인에다 삼다에게 소소 삼는 나라 단투에 차되거라 왕주 유메 기시요마 nga 왕주 요마 nga di samda yo ma se yo ma 왕주 yo ba na me ba na suinda samda re da desa ro je nga desa odi ya bu mi de ne ge kom tu ya yo ma de yo ma re desa le ke ba ka yo ma wangshi le ke ba yo ma re yu uchu ge ke ba ka yo ma me ba sa na su su ge samla ta di su su tu samda ba de kyo bu na ta tu re chu bu na ta tu re desa ya bu yo na ta me desa kyo bu ma da me na ta tu re wangji chen bo jin da wangji me ba jin da di samda tu ya ra yu de ba cha go je di samda di 배 지금 dumdi gore 저 진짜 아주게 맞아요 하려마도 제베나 고 찍고 삼는 다지마도 신 조서 당고에 개민도 하대 기내자데 dum도 gore 차도도 하대.
And as mentioned yesterday morning, what does Buddhist practice mean? It means training the mind. It's not about doing physical things or saying particular words. It's about training your mind. And to train your mind, you don't have to be wealthy. Anyone, no matter whether they're wealthy or poor or anywhere in between, can train their mind. One doesn't need to be a homeowner or own a palatial home. One can be living with one's parents, homeless. One can train one's mind. You don't need power or influence or authority to train your mind. Anyone can do so. So therefore, whatever your particular life circumstance is, you can engage in this practice of training your mind.
On that in the negi, Chesada Sanyu Jumden Digi, Anzu Nangbigi, Trotantilla, Sanyu Jumden Digi, that me, Anzu Kunchu Quesha, Soso Machevan, Kunchu Yaku Setini Yamare, that Nyamlen Ji, Tablam di Ma Sanyi Ma, Sung, and a Kenyan Kunchu Ganzolo Roche, Kivishin and Ganzolo Roche, Lamde Jedi, the Sanyu Kunchu, Kedun Kunchu, Kivishin, Naya Tide. 다 디나와 딩한주 제수 소소게 냠는 제디 소소를 제호를 다 수사이도 소소이 제 소소게 규제 사바 있는 델레티네 안게와치마 안데 덴르 기투가 디기야 샤고래 지자 디마 소소게 디 마제베는 상예나 라미게 가제 덴냠 데 짐바디 바 라바 제베는 소소게 디 삼다 마제베는 규제 사투가 말 데네자 안주게 다 탈바다 기와치마 온디고가 상예세 소소게 라바라 예수르다 지자 소소 라바 예 지상 소수기 제바에는 디라고래 디 마제바에는 라요 말에 지자 디네인자 디 제자 디니게 제 소수기 라마다 상계디 라미파 되 랍제 데 데라 데네 소수기 퇴배 된데라 삼다 두스 냐는제 디규사 데라 데네 아니 마케와치마 닌텐도를 기도를 에스기도를 해서 규단 깨내 데네 주고마도 규단 깨 가야 마사바제 아니 주투야 말에 해서 다지자 상계기 나와 상계비 투모만 비다 계시 규단 깨내 데네 안주고래 해서 상은 상보신의 규단 깨실에 데네 용고래 멤버로신의 규단 깨내 데네 용고래 세상 데네에서 랑게 제발에 데네 사베 규사 규텔에 데네 제부 약고도 용고래 해서
In Buddhism, there is no creator God. There is a founder teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, who reintroduced Buddhism into our world. He was the first teacher of this age. And there are the great community of practitioners. So they would be called the Sangha. And there are the qualities that they have generated on their mind by relying on the teachings, the Dharma. This, as Buddhists, is whom we go to for refuge. But merely having even deep faith in the three jewels, that alone is not sufficient. One has to create virtuous causes on one's continuum to achieve the virtuous results one wants, or the wholesome results one wants. Because the Buddha taught very clearly that everything comes about interdependently. There is nothing that is not a dependent arising. Everything you hope for will come about independent on causes. But also all that you don't want, that too comes about independent on causes. Recognizing this, then one strives to accumulate the causes for the results you do want and to avoid accumulating the causes for results that you do not want. So therefore, one has to have knowledge of the teachings of the Buddha to know which are the causes to accumulate and which are the ones to avoid. This means merely calling oneself a Buddhist, maybe having physical signs of being a Buddhist, is insufficient. one has to understand the teachings of the Buddha. One needs to understand the teachings of a Buddha through relying on a teacher. But even understanding the teachings of the Buddha, that alone is insufficient. One has to integrate them within one's mind. This is how one creates stronger imprints. So to be to use this situation as an illustration, hearing teachings with an engaged mind is creating fairly strong imprints on one's mind. But if that's all one does, those imprints are not that powerful. They will not alone lead to transformation of your way of thinking. Those imprints have to be reinforced by continuously hearing teachings and reflecting on them. It's this process of the continuous gathering of knowledge, including on topics that one has heard many times, and the process of continuously reflecting on them. This is what leads to powerful imprints and a transformed mind. This is imperative. So if you want good results, you have to accumulate those causes. And if you don't want other results, avoid those causes. Kind-hearted people have come about independence on causes they've created. But so too, those who are malicious, those who take pleasure in causing suffering in others, their way of thinking has also come about independence on causes. So this is something unique to the teachings of the Buddha, that everything is interdependent. All that one wants comes about in dependence on causes. Identify those and strive to accomplish them. All that one doesn't want, it also comes about in dependence on causes. Receive your teachings, know what to avoid, and then avoid it. Train your mind in this way.
Dene ani shiba ne drosa de ngandro dan dendro ni ma do yomare chiza dendro ngandro diba saba ne ngandro ma ki do gure chiza da gewa saba ne dendro ki gore dine zange gewa sa du se dine ge samda gewa sa ya ge da du chine ani chiza gewa de ge de sa nga da de sa gor ma do chi da de ma saba ne nga salom chi gewa ma saba shi son de pe sa sa de ngandro ma ki do gure samje da gewa sa gu do gewa de da de pa sa gu du sembe samda de ti cha gor da 디링기 다시에 삼다. 제자다 디니기 삼다네 시월 해봐 기지시 해봐 매봐 제자 시나 다 안들게 된들게 해봐 매봐서 다 된들게 유리 개와 싸우도 싸야 돼. 니 다든 싸우도 선배게 삼로 디니 좀 삼다든 싸우고 선배 삼로도 숙침 뭐 삼다디 디링이 시야기다. 나중에 삼다나 디스당 고래 해셔래. 나 다든 싸우도 선배 삼다도 싸야 돼. 그래서는 가서 시야 돼. 네? 지 수rim소야 류가지니 that's 수스네 that sa said so samnonaria nge lunga isunu gane shala ne ba sawagini chimya sambege dusine samnataya susugi lunga isunu gane shalye pembe jawa karatsun susugi kareje robachina shalye pembege dusen jeje duchigiya sambe je to ba chigi simbe samtaya dine shengi susule ne ba cheba da dine shebe ne anji palya ne ba ki khongro sa da palyo gyunje che pa chewi jawa sawagini chimya sambe samtaya dene ane gewe jawa dene pe yagure sne mutuji dene chigi sambege andudusin sunrikia andusine jine da nge maobane ane gedi ne anga anje gewe shin chenye de ba cheji dizane chue gedi na gewe jawa nyamne jetuwa yongosho sambege dusine samdai da dusine samda daden jeor sme jedi dirida so de babsati diringe samdai 가상의 삼로다에디 지역급이 김전디 다 되는 드링이 삼다나 직접 다 가상들 제 ben에 렌진이 베데베든 신도 예가 된지스데 대단주 밀르름 버체세 예가와의 된침버세야 디야 디 두에 규디 베제시하게 된다는 시고래 제가 예가와 된의 침버래 디야고래 제가 디 규사고래세 조니버디 인생고도 이벌렘별로 유진배밖에 지유로서 단다 디니보 니레 밥제 디삼로 다야데 계시모래서 단다 디레다.
The meaning then of what we looked at this morning is that this precious human rebirth is impermanent. The incredible opportunity that this life presents is rapidly drawing to an end. That is certain. But what is completely unknown to any of us is when that end will come. There is no certainty in terms of how much time lies before us. We don't know who amongst us will be the first to die. We cannot say it will be the oldest. There is no certainty. And we know this from what we observe in the world. But we need to take this to heart because of what it leads to. And it leads to a determination that therefore I must strive to strengthen my habituation to virtuous ways of thinking and break my habituation to non-virtuous ways of thinking and acting. And as the time of my death is completely unknown, I must do so from right now, and I must do so in a sustained manner. And by doing so, you will then, when death does come, you will die with a relaxed mind, even perhaps a joyous mind, confident in your next rebirth. And you'll be confident in your next rebirth because of your deep habituation that you've gained through meditating repeatedly over a sustained period on, firstly, ethical restraint. Ethical restraint, again, is the determination not to do harm, not to take life, not to steal and so forth, not to speak in a way that deceives others or takes advantages of others and so forth, and to even restrain one's way of thinking so one doesn't have malicious thoughts towards others or desirous thoughts towards possessions and so forth. This is ethical restraint, restraining oneself physically, verbally, mentally within the confines of what is ethical. But in brief, it's I will do no harm to others or myself. And then training in generosity, which in brief is the wish to give of oneself, to be of benefit. Ethics is the determination not to harm. Generosity is the wish to be of benefit, to help others, to be a source of good in their lives. Thirdly, then, training in patience, the determination for one's to take care of one's mind in times of adversity and ensure one's mind doesn't become disturbed. Fourthly, enthusiastic perseverance, taking joy, delight in one's virtuous endeavors, thereby developing a deep habituation and wanting, a yearning to be ethical, knowing then that in future lives one will seek out an ethical path, and this then is reinforced by the fifth course, that of prayer and dedication, where one dedicates one's virtue to continue to meet the Dharma, to continue to meet one's teachers, and continue to have a deep interest in the Dharma. So by having cultivated these 5 causes, when death comes, one can die in a relaxed mind, in a relaxed, with a relaxed mind, welcoming a new body, a new life, an ongoing opportunity. And what's presented here in this third verse ties very closely with what we looked at in the second verse, because it is this precious human rebirth with its 18 freedoms and endowments that is so rare that it can be said to have been found only once. And it's rare because the causes are so difficult to accumulate. And those causes are what we've looked at both yesterday and today. Ethics up to prayer, those 5 causes. So by engaging in this meditation, here on this retreat, hearing teachings and engaging in the meditation, and continuing to do so on a daily basis when you are not here, this is how you develop habituation, how your mind becomes ethical, generous, patient, and so forth. So thank you. Then we can conclude there for this morning. But if you have some questions, then do feel free to ask. Etsepo?
There was a question that came up yesterday in relation to being able to be inspired to take the essence of perfect human rebirth all day and all night. Can those, the things that we're advised to do, can that fit with a householder with a lot of responsibilities of elderly parents and other family? How can you, with not a lot of time for formal practice, can that combine with the busy responsibilities?
Dene konsul dutsu kompa yamate. Dene konsul kantis ninsen kundu lenki.
지나다 되네기 지나 인생고도 렘비 로세디 다 뒤수 지나 저기 뒤수 유연들을 배제만 하셔야 뒤수 된 면에 이거지 쇼회 지다 니우르 와도 가브레 삼다 책으로 와다 뒤집에 무티시 디장야 삼다 뭐 하셔 말와다 저 강요지 요지야 와다 뒤수 와다 근데 쇼회로 사다 되네게 삼다에 지다 내가 레디 가브레 삼다 하셔야 와다 삼도 가스가요 말 그냥 아주 공부하자 조회네 삼날 어당이 셴레 내가 지기 누가스 셴레 내가 지금에 삼배 삼다죠 와다 근데 셴레 비는 아주 네베 메셔 네요로 시네 진짜서 안건 네요들 그것도 콜링에 미 팬도 지기 있었다 당이 또 소수기 진배차오다 소수기 당이 류기 되는 콜이야 로고 지기 인셈비 대주 제인 셈비 삼다지 로고 지야다 되네게 콜이야 셴레 지 네바다게 디나 지금에 삼배 삼다데 유예리 받다 인유 당한 저기 뒤수를 쉬어야 돼 봐요. 뒤수디다 지금 내가 레벨이 나다 고 조유링이 나 삼다요. 이내다 저기 삼로데 내가 될 숙치모로 삼단 디섬마고 용그래. 이내다 디네지는 아주 까브리까브리야. 삼잠래도 삼당이 되기전에 살직 다니다 야야 땅 두고라다. 맨냠레베 야고 지에나 뒤수 유가나 차상 차임 직부 제고로서는 제투에 가요 말거든. 그것도 강투도 지야 되겠지 뭐.
So this question points to a valid truth, which is that of our community here, some have more spare time than others. Those who have more spare time, recognize your fortune and don't waste that opportunity. Take it as a responsibility to the community, the direct community here, and more broadly, those of you with more time, use that time well, because what you have is greatly fortunate, and others will look at it and wish they had your spare time. Don't waste it. For those who do not have spare time, such as the original questioner, all that can be asked of you is do the best you can, because that actually is the meaning here of all day and all night. Do the best you can. For some, they have more time. They have that opportunity. And I encourage them to embrace it. Those who really are busy and have a lot of activities, this is an obstacle. And just ask, do the best you can. So how I suggest you approach it is try and take, even if it's literally 5 minutes, first thing in the morning, if you get up before others, and take that to quickly do the meditation in the way that's described. And each time I've mentioned it, it's been in a segment of 5 minutes or less. So if you just listen to that, or you learn it and say that again, but with your mind engaged, if that's all you have time to do, then that's excellent. Do that. Perhaps you can repeat it at the end of the day, just before you go to sleep. That's where you're starting. Excellent. And keep that up, and keep that up. As you start to feel the benefit of just those few minutes, you'll want to remind yourself of it during the day. And even with a busy day, there are moments when you can return to what you reflected on. Because there are times when you are doing things on autopilot. You don't need to be thinking about what you are doing because you've done it so many times. During such activities, you can then remind yourself of the meditation. When you're walking to the car, when you're going to the shops, then you can remind yourself of what you meditated on. And that way, it becomes a bit fresher during your day. And in particular, if you can, but again, when you're busy, it's difficult, to try and remind yourself of these points from the meditation before you engage in an activity, before you care for your parents, before you start your work for the day, and so forth. Then it will help be a bit more present in your day. But for those of you who are busy, to the extent you can do this, that's excellent. And I assure you, it will become easier as you become habituated to it. Because by taking pleasure in doing something habitually, you'll want to do it ever more. And therefore, thereby, the opportunities to do it ever more will come. And later in this life, when there is more time than there is right now, you'll be easily able to use that time well and not waste those opportunities should they come. Okay, then thank you very much. Thank you very much.